Hello, welcome to Common Censored. I am Lee Camp, joined as always by Eleanor Goldfield.
Hello.
And this is the show where we talk censored stories and people, sensible solutions, and common ground movements to fight and build.
And sometimes other stuff.
And thank you all to all the new people that have joined us recently. We've seen a big uptick in people joining the podcast and enjoying the podcast, and thank you all so much. So let's get started. Let's get into the shitstorm that is the primaries, as we've taken to doing most weeks, which people seem to really enjoy. We kind of recap, and we try to get through it quickly, but recap the hellstorm that is these primaries, the DNC's rigging of these elections. And rigging means a variety of things. Yes, there is the kind of direct rigging on machines that can happen, but there's also things like, just not telling us exit polls and media manipulation. And I don't think anyone denies that our media is incredibly weighted to one side, towards the center, towards the establishment, towards the right wing. So it's things like that. Anyway, we were covering the New Hampshire primary as it was happening last week. It was only like 50% results in. But now, as you all know, Bernie squeaked out a win by about 1.5%, which shows that there was no election fraud because he was only up by 8 points, unlike the last poll, or maybe it was more than that. So anyway, what an interesting thing that the polling before the actual vote was so far off, but we'll all ignore that and assume this was a legitimate primary election. But our mainstream media doesn't seem to make that the story, that Bernie won the election. They seem to be more caught up in the fact that Buttigieg came in second and Klobuchar came in third. Wow, look, she surged to third. And they also seem to be incredibly fascinated, fangirling over Bloomberg now.
As the Onion headline from a while back said, Bernie plummets up.
Up 2 points, yeah.
Right, or whatever it was.
Bernie plummets up 2 points.
But that's even too nice because that headline actually mentions Bernie's name. And the sort of absolute media blackout on Bernie is amazing. And of course, it's done absolutely on purpose. And
so I watched some of this coverage, at least maybe not a lot, but some of this coverage, and they will mention Bernie. They're definitely, and they'll show him on the screen and stuff. But it's like his mentions are just so fleeting. I would love for someone, this would take a lot of work, but someone to watch like 3 hours of election night coverage.
Oh my God, that's like torture.
Yeah, I know. And try not to kill yourself. Keep sharp objects away from you, and just calculate the amount of positive Bernie mentions, like the amount of time spent on positive Bernie anything. And that includes simple sentences like Bernie won tonight, or Bernie won by 1.5% tonight, or something like that, versus the amount of positive Pete Buttigieg or Amy Klobuchar coverage. I imagine it'd be pretty extreme. But so they seem very into Bloomberg now. Bloomberg is buying more and more of the attention nowadays. Hundreds of millions of dollars. His ads, and you wouldn't know this because you don't see TV, but his ads are all him hugging Obama in like every ad.
I've actually seen a Bloomberg ad. I think I was at like a gym somewhere. I was traveling,
and
so
did someone hold you down and push it into your face?
No, but on a treadmill, there's only so many places you can go. Yeah.
Ironically, you're sprinting.
Right.
Can't get away.
But I couldn't get away. But yeah, no, those ads are fucking horrifying. And it's even more horrifying that people watch them and they're like, oh yeah, no, that seems like a good guy.
Well, I was marveling at it really, ads, they're there for a reason. They work for a reason. We think they don't work, and they work. If you watch 1,000 hamburger ads, you want a hamburger, which is really fucked up. And Bloomberg's ads are so pervasive, and but you see him hugging Obama just constantly, and I think that unless you are a really strict media critic who is very much in tune with what's going on and really thinking about it a lot, a lot of America just slowly starts thinking like, oh yeah, Bloomberg hugs a lot of black people. Yeah, Bloomberg's really good with black people. No, Bloomberg is a fucking racist catastrophe who oversaw the largest increase in stop and frisk. It may have started before him, but he fucking loved it, and millions of people were locked up. Black and Hispanic people, and now I played it on Redacted tonight this week. Everybody should listen to these leaked audio clips of Bloomberg trying to defend his actions. It's just horrific. But anyway, I'll leave that, and we can move on to what is also part of this election, which is they need to the mainstream media and the establishment need to make sure and sideline those of us who are giving alternate viewpoints. And we talked about this before, but it is increasing. I was kind of waiting for it to increase. The attacks on things like Redacted tonight, but many more powerful alternative outlets than us. And last week, the what are they called? The Alliance for Securing Democracy came after the
Those are the best names.
I know, these names that are like just fucking horrific. Came after the Gray Zone and Status Quo, which is Jordan Sheridan's outlet, and the Gray Zone is Max Blumenthal's outlet. Gray Zone does a lot of great work. You should definitely be reading them if you aren't. And came after them for basically revealing Pete Buttigieg's actual connections to the military intelligence apparatus, the State Department. These are things that Buttigieg does not deny, like the people that have endorsed him. He released a list of 218 Defense Department, military intelligence personnel, State Department personnel who were endorsing him. So he's like proud of these things. And so the Gray Zone is covering this stuff and getting deeper into who Pete Buttigieg is, where he's gone, where he's been, and I covered it on Redacted Tonight this week. But this Alliance for Securing Democracy called Gray Zone a state-backed outlet and basically said that the CIA Pete moniker, which has gone viral on Twitter, was heavily forwarded by them, and then people retweeting theirs, and then they specifically went after me, Redacted Tonight, and Watching the Hawks, because we're on RT America. So they were like, look, Russia is furthering Gray Zone's false reporting. Now, Gray Zone's reporting is not false. It's true. And
which is why it pisses them off.
And I am not Russia, and Watching the Hawks is not Russia. And I know that drives them nuts. But I write all my own stuff. I'm not pressured to say anything. I've never been censored. But they use this to try and act like the idea of CIA Pete is something created by Russia, when it's absolutely not.
Yeah, no, it's but it's the classic. It's the class. I mean, I've been called a Russian stooge as well, and I'm funded by Patreon, so I don't know if. And I have yet to get that illustrious check from George Soros or Putin or really anybody else that supposedly owes me money. So yeah, I mean, but this is just the classic game, and it's so frustrating that people fall for it, in the sense that people will actually read that and be like, "Oh God, just another outlet that's peddling Russian propaganda." And I mean, we've totally beat the dead horse on this, but just the idea that Russia would care enough to fucking start a hashtag about Pete Buttigieg being a CIA op, that is such a deep cut. I don't even, that is, wow.
Well, and furthermore, it's this thing used to just delegitimize any legitimate critiques of the establishment, of these fucking vipers that are running for president, of these, Wall Street stooges like Pete Buttigieg, who proudly lists, former directors of the World Bank as endorsers. This is, Wall Street Pete is another nickname for him, and they want to delegitimize this, but it's all fucking legitimate criticism. These are all facts about him and his past and what he's involved in, and they use the Russia thing, and I know it's gonna keep getting worse. And so actually, I think I said on Redacted Tonight last week that what's terrifying me the most is they haven't really, not much, started calling Bernie Sanders a Russian, because that's the thing they're saving. The fact that they haven't started doing that is terrifying, because it means they've got some big he's Russian plot coming up, and they're saving it.
Right, like the fact that he went to the USSR in, like, what was it, like 88 or something?
Back when, here's the thing, when we had there were sister cities, and this was done as a campaign to have more global cooperation, to have people understand various people around the world. And so his sister city was one in Russia. I don't know which one. And I believe that's the reason he was there.
But even if it's not.
But even if it's not.
Even if
the
he was
idea that
just a
you-
politician that felt the need to go make connections with the only other superpower in the world at that time, I'd say that's a good idea.
Or
Those
even-
people should be sitting at a fucking table together.
Or even
Like-
if you're Tulsi Gabbard and you go and meet with Assad, you don't think learning about other world leaders, what they stand for, what they want is important, then you're a fucking idiot. Like Jill Stein was in Moscow at that event because she wanted to meet with Putin to talk about denuclearization. That didn't happen, but
But it's
That's-
called diplomacy.
it's called diplomacy, and you should want that. You should want all
Right.
world leaders, not even world leaders. You should want all people of the world talking and learning
Right.
about other people in the world. I mean, it's so fucking idiotic that we're like, this guy once went to Russia. This guy was once in North Korea. What?
But just think about-
they stabbed a needle in his arm that had evil, serum in it, and
But just think about, like, if that were the conversation that we had about Germany because of World War I and World War II. He went to Germany. People would look at you like you're a fucking idiot. And yet, which nation, if we're really going to talk about who was the biggest asshole besides the U.S. in the 20th century, that would be Germany. And
Well,
if you want to go by, guilty by association, Austria, because they're the ones that birthed Hitler. So it's like, do you really want to? I mean, this is so fucking insane. And I recently saw an article on Medium where this woman was talking about the Generation X and how you can't fool Generation X. And I thought, oh, cool, this is going to be an interesting article about how, the Dems can't fool us and the Republicans can't fool us. But no, one of the first lines there was like, we grew up during the Cold War, and we know that you can't be friends with Russia, no matter how hard you want it. And I'm like, what the fuck? What? What the fuck? Like, what you're saying is you can't fool us because we've already been brainwashed. You're
Right,
already,
we're
your
already
work here is
lost.
done, folks.
We're already lost.
So move along, and us good proles are dutifully brainwashed, heading to work, and thank you.
we're already fucking idiots, so you can't fool us.
Yeah.
'Cause, we done been all the fooling.
I mean, it's oh god.
I mean, yeah, it's gonna get worse. It's gonna get worse. And speaking of how it's gonna get worse, I have another new video coming out this week about what seems to be statistically almost definite now in the primaries, whether there is a level of election fraud or not. Chances are that Bernie Sanders, let's project out, and 538.com does these thousands of models, and I'm not going to get into the details because that's what I do in the video, which you all can watch at youtube.com/redacted tonight this coming week. But I'm just going to say that they do thousands of models, and they found that Bernie Sanders is likely to win most states, almost every state. But he's only going to win, once they add in all the voter suppression and the various election fraud and the not counting provisional ballots and all this shit. He'll probably win by a few delegates here or there. 2 delegates this state, 5 that state, 1 that state. And he'll go into the convention with a plurality, but not a majority. If he doesn't get the majority, at that point, the establishment, the DNC establishment, Tom Perez, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, all the rest, can group together the delegates of the fucking horrible status quo, centrist, war hawk, Wall Street politicians, add in the superdelegates, and that'll be your nominee. So, there's rumors that Bloomberg would announce Hillary Clinton as his VP, but even if he doesn't do that horror show, if he announces that fucking Amy Klobuchar is his VP, and then they say, oh yeah, Bernie came in with the most delegates, but he didn't have 50%, so here is your nominee. And they've said in court they have the right to rig this thing, and that seems to be almost definitely how they'll rig it. And so, as you've said many times, it's what you do at that point. It's what we do at that point. How do people stand up at that point and demand something else?
Yeah, absolutely. Because just like they did in 2016, they will. And they've put in more. They've put in more ways to fuck Bernie Sanders or a candidate like him over. And I talked about this when I had Nick Brana, the founder of Movement for a People's Party, on my show, and he outlined the 7 ways that the Democrats will steal 2020. Not could, will do this, and they're already doing a lot of those things that Nick mentioned.
I know the Iowa app, and now they have a new. We talked about it last week or whatever. A Nevada tool.
The Nevada tool, which
the iPad tool.
Yeah,
not an app, tool.
So this is, and of course, again, like the only question is how we respond. Because we know how they're going to respond. They're already responding that way. The question is, how will we respond? And one of the things that sort of answers that question is a website and a concept that some friends of mine and I have been working on called Bern the DNC, spelled BERN, the DNC.org. And if you go there, there's we're still working on the website, and we're still working on the concept as well, and it's definitely not like a top-down idea. This is very much a collaborative effort with folks who want to hand that ultimatum over and say, look, we have tried to make our voices heard by voting, and you fucked us over continuously, so now we're gonna do something else. And there's plenty of roles and spaces for people to help out in whatever capacity they can. And so if you go to burnthednc.org, again, that's BERN, the DNC.org, there's a way for you to sign up saying that, yes, I am going to take to the streets, and I'm going to react in a very proactive and powerful way if and when the DNC steals this from Bernie.
So basically, this is a nonviolent action group of people that are planning ahead, because if you end up on your back foot when you get to the convention and go, oh my goodness, they stole it from the guy who had overwhelmingly more delegates. Oh, gee willikers. So it's getting ahead and creating a nonviolent action group. It's BERN the DNC.org.
Yeah, and again, there's plenty of roles for folks. Even if you're not planning on being in Milwaukee, there's the opportunity to organize something where you're at, for instance, at DNC headquarters in your state or area. There's ways to support in other ways if you're not able to take to the streets physically. So there's lots of ways.
Passing out blueberry muffins.
Oh, is that something we're doing?
I think someone said they're willing to do that.
Can we do chocolate chip? I'm a chocolate chip muffin person.
Are you?
Yeah.
Well, they were call them burn berries, though.
Burn berries? That sounds awful.
BERN.
No, I'm not down with that.
Oh,
okay. But yeah, so that's again burnthednc.org, and there's lots of ways, and I want to make this clear too, and we're working again on building up the site a little bit more. But I want to make this clear, even if you're listening to this and you're like, well, I'm going to shut this shit off because I don't like Bernie because of, these reasons or what have you. I hear you. I totally hear you. But that's not really the point here. We're using this as a jumping off point, kind of the same way that the quote unquote pension reform was used as a jumping off point in France to bring folks from a lot of different spaces and political ideologies together in the streets to say, look, the pension reform is a microcosm. It's an example of the corruption and the undemocratic reality that we live in. And we're using that as a coming together point to address the larger issues and the overarching issues of living in this capitalist regime. So even if you're not a Bernie person, if you're a Tulsi person, or if you're like a fuck it all, I don't prescribe to this kind of bullshit at all. This is like, we want you, and we want your ideas, and we want your collaboration here, because this is not just about Bernie. It's the fact that we don't live in a democracy. We don't have a say. Just the fact that we have to create a site like this just sheds light on the fact that we don't actually live in a fucking democracy. So yeah, so this is a jumping off point, and go to burnthednc.org. Sign up.
BERN.
Share it with your friends.
Well said, well put. I wanted to talk about something else that we have not talked that much about for good reason. But so the impeachment show is now over for the most part. We obviously have talked about it, but not over and over again like most of your outlets. There's a million things to impeach Trump for, but A, they're not going after any of the real ones like war crimes or emoluments or any of that shit. And B, if they were to get Trump impeached, you would just end up with Mike Pence as president, which equally bad, if not worse. So that putting all your energies into that is ridiculous, and it's kind of just a way for the faux resistance Democrats to act like they are doing anything when they're doing basically nothing to actually stop Wall Street, stop big oil, stop big pharma. They do very little. So, but here's the update, is that after this impeachment show, polls now reveal that Trump is more popular than ever. He has near 50% approval rating, and it's one of the highest of his presidency, maybe the highest. And it's similar to what happened after Clinton was impeached for getting a blowjob. And it shows that most of the American people that were even on the fence about supporting Trump don't like ridiculous impeachment, one-party impeachment shows that are not about the actual genuine crimes being committed against Americans, against people around the world. I mean, there is a plethora of shit you could impeach Trump for, and instead withholding missiles to Ukraine is what they came up with.
Well, right. When Trump stands up there and says this is a witch hunt and this is absurd, people are listening to that and thinking, yeah, this is. And they're also realizing that whereas before the impeachment proceedings began, there was actually like some talk amongst the Democrats about Medicare for all.
Right.
And
right. People
were actually talking about
Green New Deal.
Yeah, people were actually talking about shit that matters to people in this country. And then all of a sudden it shifted to a 1%er tit for tat. And everyone was like, yeah, this is a fucking witch hunt. So maybe Trump has a point. If he has a point about that, maybe he has a point about some other things.
Yeah.
And so basically all this does is it shovels people towards fucking Trump. You're Pied Pipering people literally off a fucking cliff.
Right, because they think that things like this make them think that Trump is legitimately anti-establishment. He's the one guy who is actually standing up to the D.C. swamp. Like, look at him. Like, they're trying to get him, and they just can't stop him because he's so awesome, because he's against the establishment. Now, you and I and most people who are truly understand or paying attention know that in the largest things, Trump is not anti-establishment. He's not anti-establishment for the tax cuts to the billionaires or for the endless wars or for the enriching himself or in a million ways. Israel. Like, he's not anti-establishment. He's anti-establishment when it comes to, like, the way CNN reports about him. Or what the Washington Post is saying. That's where he's anti-establishment. And so this thing has made a lot of Americans that were, kind of liked him or thought maybe they liked him go, wow, he must really be rubbing the establishment that is exploiting us the wrong way.
Yeah, but, well, yeah. I could go off on a long diatribe about the whole impeachment thing, but bottom line is that, as we noted on the show before, no matter who won, quote unquote, in this fiasco, the people lose. And that's evident here because even if Trump's approval rating was low or high or whatever, the people lose regardless. So yeah.
Well, and speaking of that, something I forgot to say on the Bloomberg stuff is that if it ends up being Bloomberg versus Trump, then you've got billionaire oligarch versus billionaire oligarch, both racist old white guys.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is a win-win for the establishment if you end up with Bloomberg versus Trump. It is a disgusting and repulsive win-win. Legitimately, one of them used to be a Republican, Bloomberg, and one of them used to be a Democrat, Trump. So that shows how meaningless our parties are and how meaningless that election will be if you end up with oligarch versus oligarch.
And that's why you also see shit trending on Twitter. It was basically like, I'm Bernie or Trump, which is, fucking insane. However, it goes to show that it's like people are going to look at, somebody like Bloomberg, which is basically the same thing as Trump, which is why it's ironic that they would vote for Trump if they're for Bernie. However, same thing as in 2016. They saw Hillary standing up there and they were like, I just can't do it. Fuck that. I know exactly what this dynasty is all about and I'm not interested. And same thing with, somebody like Bloomberg, who has a history in politics, and they see exactly what he's been about, just like Biden. And Buttigieg is a fucking like snake, and so they'd rather have somebody like Trump, which is incidentally what the Democrats are thinking too. They would rather have Trump than Bernie.
They'd rather have Trump. A couple of quick things before we continue. Thank you all to so many of you who have signed up recently at patreon.com/commoncensored. You fund this show. It's not a ton of money, but it's enough for us to keep the lights on for this show. And we have no corporate sponsors, no sponsors whatsoever outside of you. So patreon.com/commoncensored. If you are owed a copy of Moment of Clarity, my book, my 2012 book, which I will sign and send your way. If you're owed a copy because you have been signed up to the Patreon and thought you had one coming your way, please email us at commoncensored@protonmail.com, both because we need to find out and we need to get your address. So commoncensored@protonmail.com. Let us know if we owe you a book. I am coming, and Eleanor will be on some of these shows. I am coming to Dallas, Austin, Flagstaff, Tucson, New York City, and a bunch of other cities farther out, and that's all at redactedtour.com. That's Dallas, Austin, Flagstaff, Tucson are the upcoming ones, New York City. Redactedtour.com. Please come out and join me for this part of my new book tour. But I will be doing stand-up comedy at all of those events. It's not just a book reading or anything. It is a full-on tour. So I hope you'll.
But the book is fucking awesome.
Thank you.
So
thank you. The book is at leecampbook.com. It has begun shipping to people who order online. It's not in stores quite yet. But leecampbook.com. Something you can do for me if you want to help out is go to your local bookstore, your indie bookstore, and tell them that they should grab a few copies. Ask them to order it for you, and hopefully they'll put some on the shelves. So also, Eleanor's work is at artkillingapathy.com. You can get her videos, her writing, a little bit of everything at artkillingapathy.com. And sign up to our free email list. Text the word censored to 33777. It's completely free in the U.S. You can also sign up internationally at leecamp.com. All right.
And also, I will be in Denver on March.
I forgot.
19. You hate me, don't you?
No.
I will be in March. Wow. He's dying.
You got
I'm
it.
fucking tired. We're
on.
gonna make it through this.
Hang in there.
I will be in Denver in March 19th, playing an anti-war extravaganza show with Emily Yates. She's an Army veteran, and March 19th is the 17th fucking anniversary of the second war in Iraq.
And it's going to include a little bit of, a lot of things. Music,
spoken word, and music. And we're also going to have folks...
Anger? Will there be some anger?
Oh, there will be. We're going to have folks from local organizations there, like Answer Coalition. Their local chapter is going to be there. About Face and Vets for Peace. So there's going to be a lot of great solidarity and camaraderie there. So
Where are the tickets?
I'm getting there. Don't rush me. Lee hates my verbosity. So
that is not true.
So you can go to my website, artkillingapathy.com, and if you click on performance, then you will get to a link there under upcoming performances. So check it out, and please spread it and share it with your friends. And I will also say, if there is somebody who's interested in going, but they don't have the money for a ticket, no one will be turned away for lack of funds. Just don't lie to us about it. So you can
have.
Also,
I mean, that's the thing is you'd have to come up and be like, I don't have money, so you've got to put on a show.
No.
About not having money
You
at
stop
an
that.
anti-war protest show, which would be pretty shitty of you. So don't do that.
Oh, you're saying if you were
I'm
the
talking about the
asshole.
liars. Yeah.
I see. Yes, but we want this to be a community event, and so this is not about shoving money in our own pockets. Obviously, if it were, I wouldn't have the job that I have.
Which, by the way, now you remind me, I have the same policy with my shows. It's on my website. If you truly don't have the $10 for a ticket to one of my shows, email me. Let me know what show you're looking at, and there's a possibility for financial assistance most of the time. So.
There we go. Moving on.
All right, we're ready to move on? Okay. Let's see. Quick update on Assange. We talked about him getting out of solitary last week, but something else that I mentioned on Redacted tonight is that the Council of Europe, which is a human rights and law organization that represents 820 million Europeans, has finally stepped forward and said Julian Assange should be freed. He should be released. So that is a major...
fucking time.
Yeah, agreed. About fucking time. That is a major organization that is the umbrella over a lot of people. That a lot of people look to them for human rights violations, what is going on in the world, and they have said Assange should be freed. So, in case you were wondering whether Julian Assange should fucking be released, in case you were still on the fence on that one, which why would you be? Okay, another update on, and we've got some good news updates. The Embassy Protection Collective got some news in court this week.
Yeah, so basically there was a mistrial, and what this boils down to is that the government couldn't convince the jury that the people that were holding space in the Venezuelan embassy were fucking breaking the law and doing it illegally. And
4 people, 2 of them run the Popular Resistance podcast network and newsletter, which you guys are probably familiar with. And yeah, so 4 of them were on trial for being in that Venezuelan embassy here in D.C. We talked a lot about it when it was going on. And the government was trying to get them locked up with the possibility of a year in jail and a $100,000 fine per person. And there was a mistrial.
Yes, so this is good news, definitely, that the government couldn't make a strong enough case, beyond a reasonable doubt, that whole shtick. However, this isn't perfect news, because they do have to go back to court for a hearing to see if the government wants to retry. So they might have to go through the whole fucking trial rigmarole again. So it's really important that we stay on this and that we pay attention and not just think that this is like a one and done victory. So again, folks can keep up to date with what's going on with that by going to defendembassyprotectors.org. But right now it is cause for some mild celebration.
I think so, because I think yes, having another trial will suck, and I don't think they're looking forward to it if it happens. But when the government does these type of trials, things are so loaded against the defendants.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not allowed, we've discussed this already, but they're not allowed to present almost anything in the courtroom. And so the fact that even without the ability to say, hey, Juan Guaido's not the president, hey, the people that own this embassy and run this embassy and pay the rent on this embassy asked us to be there.
And how about the U.S. can't, by international law, walk into another country's embassy, because that embassy belongs to that country. That's how fucking embassies work.
Right.
So just the fact that U.S. law enforcement stormed into the Venezuelan embassy is fucking illegal under international law. But that also couldn't be brought up in the trial.
So the fact that without any of that being mentioned in the trial, they were still able to get a mistrial is pretty fucking incredible. And I think it's a big win.
And also, this also shows the importance of good movement lawyers. So if you are a lawyer or you know someone who's a lawyer, and they're good at their job, maybe give them a tug towards these kind of trials, because trials against activists are only going to get more and more frequent as the state continues to criminalize the act of standing up for a livable future and for human rights. So yeah, we need a lot more awesome lawyers on our side.
And speaking of awesome lawyers, although I'm not going to try and say her name.
Who?
Mara's.
Oh, Mara Verheyden-Hilliard.
Damn, you nailed it.
Boom.
She is representing Abby Martin in another update I wanted to get to you, which this is a pretty impressive, brave lawsuit. But the idea that it even had to be brought is like mind blowing. Abby Martin was going to be one of the key speakers at an event in Georgia. And the event was, about Palestinian rights and things like that. Abby Martin has done a lot on that. She has a movie out called Gaza Fights for Freedom that everyone should check out. Anyway, you might have heard, I think we talked about this before on the show months ago, that certain states were passing a bill saying that government contractors were and people that worked with the state in any way might be forced to sign a pledge, basically a loyalty oath to Israel, saying that they would not support in any of their work inside the state or outside the state the BDS movement, the act to the movement to boycott Israel because of their apartheid against Palestine. And Abby Martin, of course, that'd be ridiculous. She does tons of work to support BDS and support the boycotting. And you know, she's very brave on that front. And she said, "Bullshit! I'm not signing this thing. I'm not signing this loyalty oath." So ultimately, they said, well, then we, as I believe it's a university that connected to the state that was bringing her for this thing. They said, well, they said, we can't let you speak because you aren't signing this pledge. So she is now bringing a lawsuit against Georgia with the help of other organizations. So it's not just her. But it is based on the idea that you have fucking freedom of speech. I mean, and what's amazing is that meanwhile, these universities and things, these public state-connected universities are defending the right of fucking neo-Nazis to speak, fucking horrible human beings to speak, because guess what? We have freedom of speech.
Well, and it's also like, because you don't have to sign a pledge to the United States in order to speak at a fucking university.
Because that would violate freedom of speech.
Right. And people do, and people have gone to universities and spoken. I mean, you and I have both spoken at universities about the U.S. empire and been really scathing against it, rightfully so. But yet nobody's like, well, I'm sorry you can't do that because you have to sign this pledge that you love the United States and that you support them.
Right, instead they just call us Russian, but yeah.
Right, but the idea that you would not only, like, that you'd have to sign a pledge to a foreign government, like, talk about foreign interference in our fucking government.
Right.
Holy shit. Like, and this is something that we've also talked about on the podcast. This shit is the shit that leads to a rise in violence against Jews. This is the shit, because this lends credence to the people who are out there saying that Jews eat babies and they control our government. We don't eat babies.
I've had like two babies. It's really not that many when you think about the number of meals I've had. And I've had two babies. It's like nothing. It's like nothing.
Like today or
no,
ever?
It's over 5-10 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's not a bad average. But
that's less than the number of Mountain Dews I've had. Like,
ew,
it's
gross.
Yeah, I know, and I don't
I'd
even like
rather
those.
have a baby.
I don't even like those. I've been very desperate a couple of times, and I've had a Mountain Dew. But
I'm sorry you were that desperate. That sounds rough. But this lends credence to that
Mountain
bullshit.
Dew worse for you than babies.
Yes,
I mean, let's be honest.
Scientifically speaking.
Yeah, chemically speaking.
Although it depends on where the baby came from.
Well, you wash it first.
Oh, gross, dude. Oh, that just reminds me of the people who eat placenta, which is just, like that's
right. Did you? It was
funny,
funny, and now you made it gross.
This is a thing. Also, just a side note.
And then you're one of those people where
No,
it's
I'm
like
not.
we're on
I
a
would
good
never-
riff, and then you take it to Nasty Town.
Hey, that's a part of the baby. I'm just saying. But there are also people who drink urine. Side note, I'm just saying.
Oh, you're making it even worse. Jesus.
I'm not saying like as a sex thing.
I can't bring you out anywhere.
I'm not saying as a sex thing. Like they do it because they think it's like eternal youth or some shit. I'm not even
about
lying.
like a Peter Thiel billionaire cups of urine in a housing unit that he's rented or whatever.
This is a thing. I swear. When I lived in LA, this is something that people did. I'm just saying. I never did it because that shit's disgusting. But hey, at least it's sterile.
Did they sell that at the smoothie shop? Would you like a urine and wheatgrass shot?
Yeah, probably. I wouldn't be surprised. But
it's been blessed by a rabbi, so it's...
Oh, God. Anyway, wow, we went to some dark places there for a second.
I'm having a good time talking about eating babies. You had to bring it to urine. Ugh, gross.
With a quick stop at placenta. So this whole bullshit with the signing the pledges lends credence to the people who are anti-Semites and say crazy shit like the Jews control the government, the Jews control the banks and everything like that. That gives rise to more violence against Jews. So if you are actually anti-Semitic, then you should be very anti this kind of bullshit. You should be anti-AIPAC. You should be actually anti-Israel. And so this is so fucked on so many different levels, on the free speech level and on the anti-Semitic level as well.
Right. If you're anti-Semitic, like literally you're like a neo-Nazi and you literally hate Jews, then this would be a great plan for you.
Right.
It'd be great for you to have people signing pledges when they go into a state that they will never support the idea of boycotting an apartheid situation in Palestine and Israel, because then you can run around as your anti-Semitic self and say the Jews are making you sign this pledge against freedom of speech. You can, it's like perfect for you. It's the same with Trump's that he called Judaism a nationality, and therefore we're going to make a law. It's a hate crime to go against a nationality. Well, if you're anti-Semitic, that is a great thing to have on your side, saying, oh, the Jews passed forward this law and blah, 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 and they should go back to their nation because Judaism is a nationality,
Right.
so go back to Israel. Like, it's amazing that people are falling for this shit.
Yeah, but it's also really awesome and important that folks like Abby Martin and Marva Hayden Hilliard and the legal team are standing up and saying this is some shit, but in a more eloquent legalese, I imagine.
So you're saying you wouldn't be fit for that job?
No, I am not one of those badass lawyers that we need.
They would phrase it in lawyerly terms like, this est fecal matter. This is a matter for the fecal courts. Okay, now let's get on to pimping.
Yeah, and
Let's
that's
move on
not
to-
him misreading our notes, folks.
Nope.
So this is something that I first.
This is so horrifying.
This is something that I
is
first
so-
heard
this made me really
Harriet
angry.
Fraud talk about on Richard Wolff's podcast. Harriet Fraud is a psychotherapist in New York, and she's also been
With an
incredibly.
unfortunate name for
I
an
know.
economic podcast.
I know.
It doesn't. It's not
And she's been very active in the women's rights movement for decades. And she is the one that first introduced me to this term, sugaring. And basically what this is.
That's what you sprinkle on the babies, right? When you eat them.
Oh, God.
Well, you got to marinate them.
And sugar? Come
No,
on.
like honey,
Your
like you
cooking
get some-
skills are shit, dude. No, you want like a balsamic base, I think.
Balsamic. Oh, you're looking for a savory baby.
How could you not?
Oh, I was thinking,
Babies
like a
aren't
sweet,
sweet.
a sweet maple
No.
baby.
No, babies aren't sweet. That doesn't work.
I'm getting hungry just talking about it.
Time for baby burgers. Anyway, no. So sugaring is the name that's given to the sugar baby / sugar daddy arrangements, which is essentially prostitution. And this is an enormously profitable and really rapidly growing trade.
Explain it more.
And basically what it is it's women, young women. They vie for 18 to 30 range, and most of the men start at 45 and go well on up from there. And
But and a lot of this is done either through a website or an app.
well, so one of the main ones is called Seeking Arrangements, and this is an app, or sorry, it's a website.
And this is how they get around. This is also how they get around prostitution laws, because technically, I think in a lot of these states, prostitution is described as like paying for sex over the course of an hour or a day or something. It's not an arrangement where you go and date the quote unquote date the person, where you say, oh yeah, I will be your quote unquote girlfriend for, I don't know, months, maybe weeks, months, and you will pay me with various gifts and jewels and things like that. And
Well,
so
and
it's kind of like long-term prostitution. In a
Well,
way.
it's basically called dating with benefits, and that's the sort of transaction that they put for it. This idea that they're gonna buy them gifts and they're gonna pay their rent. And a lot of this is actually this is what makes it particularly twisted. A lot of it is used as a way to get around student debt. In fact, seekingarrangements.com, for instance, on their website, it says, quote, Seeking Arrangements has helped facilitate hundreds of thousands, if not millions of arrangements that have helped students graduate debt-free.
Ugh, God.
Promotional videos on the site show young, beautiful women enrolled in, I'm not making this up, Sugar Baby University. And they're shown in classrooms holding wads of cash, driving luxury cars, and discussing the pleasure and ease of being a sugar baby.
Now, our discussion of this gets more complicated than like if they were to discuss this on MSNBC, because I think they would just go, ew, this is so horrible. And I think, if I have this right, although you can correct me, you and I view this as horrible in certain ways, but we're not necessarily opposed to the idea of prostitution if an adult is not, I mean, it's very complicated. I think we've had philosophical discussions about it before, because it is, if an adult makes a decision, then they should be allowed to make that decision. And there are prostitution like unions and things where women say, we're tired of our job being illegal because I'm an adult, I've made this choice, and I don't feel this is fair that society has, made me some sort of criminal because I want to do this as a job. But on the other hand, you and I are, very unhappy with economic force. Mm-hmm. And economic force forces a lot of people into this. But at the same time, I am equally repulsed by soldiers who join up for economic force. So, or maybe more
coal
so.
miners,
maybe more so. Yeah.
Basically, they're also selling their bodies for a paycheck, just in a really different way.
Right. So then the question is there any reason we should be more repulsed or more unhappy with a woman if it's done? Let's begin by if it's done legitimately and safely, and they're not fearing for their lives or violence or.
Well, I think here's the thing. When we talk about prostitution as a concept, or sex work, I have friends that have been sex workers, and some of them have done it willingly because they just really enjoy sex and they really enjoy being, like a dominatrix, for instance. But more of them did it because they had no choice. They felt they had no choice, and they said, to themselves, "What do I have? Well, I have my body, and I can use it." And the problem here, as you mentioned, Lee, is the economic force and the fact that this extreme power dynamic, which is, of course, incredibly sexist and also racist. And a lot of these, this article makes the point that a lot of these men are married. I think something like 40% of the people on these sites, of the men on these sites, are already married. And so they're looking for something extramarital where they can get freaky, so to speak. And so a lot of there's a lot more tendency towards extreme violence, and these women having to perform these fucked up fantasies for these old rich predominantly white dudes, and also the feeling that they're owned by them. I mean, one woman talks about how this guy would paid for her apartment and then would come by every day for sex, and even if she didn't want to, he would rape her, basically. And she said that she had no choice because otherwise she would be homeless, and he would tell her that.
So that's why these long-term arrangements are actually worse in a lot of ways. I mean, obviously there are horrific prostitution situations that are not long-term, but worse than many of the situations because these women get into it thinking they'll have some sort of choice, okay, I'll date him for a few weeks, quote unquote date. I realize this is not legitimate dating, but quote unquote date him for a few weeks and, do the sugar daddy thing, get the gifts and, okay, so a little bit of sex. I don't care. I don't view sex that way, like it's harming my body and then I'll leave. And then a lot of them get trapped in this thing. And you were saying, trapped, like he's telling her she's going to be homeless, but I imagine there's a lot of things where it's far worse trapped. It's trapped and violence is done against them. And they are literally told, I'll fucking kill you if you leave. Like, it's a very complicated situation when especially young girl gets involved with someone long-term and he has complete control over her.
Right. And then another issue is blackmail. Another woman was talking about how she was enrolled in a good college, and she decided that she didn't want to keep doing this sugar baby, sugar daddy thing. And then he said, if you don't keep basically fucking me and letting me control your life, which she makes the point that he was controlling her life, that he was paying for everything, and she didn't have a way to eat without him, but she wanted to try to move away from that because she realized that it was really fucking up her life. And then he said, I'm going to send pictures of you to the dean of your college, and I will ruin your life, and I will get you kicked out of school. So this is the other thing, that women fear that because this is so, I mean, prostitution is illegal, but even the idea of being a sort of like escort or, you know, arm candy is so frowned upon, not from the perspective of the guy though. Like if he were to send those pictures, he knows that he's going to be okay as the sick fuck who wants a woman. And she points out that he wanted someone that he could pass off as a niece or someone much younger than him. So this sick fuck is going to be fine, but it's her that's going to get potentially kicked out of school or her life ruined because she was forced economically into a situation, into this violent, like oppressive relationship, not even relationship, situation, and he's going to get off scot-free.
So, yeah, absolutely right. It's repulsive. So I'm trying to think, like, if it were, so there's the power dynamic, which is terrible, but if this were men prostitutes, which do exist, and so let's say the power dynamic wasn't an issue, yes, economically there's still an issue there, but at least they're not as afraid that they're going to be beaten up or something. How much of our like repulsion of this, and as you're saying with sending these photos to the college, is it because of our fucked up cultural view of like a woman who has a lot of sex is a whore and a man who has a lot of sex, it's fine? So, I mean, a guy could be this type of prostitute and probably leave that business and probably not even be that ashamed to tell other people later, be like, oh yeah, I did this prostitution thing for a while. I got to have a lot of sex. Like, he could borderline brag about it because our cultural view of sex between men and women is so fucked up.
True, but to me, it's not really about the sex because
it's more
just
about
like
the power.
Well, just like I saw this brilliant meme once, saying, you know, rape is not about sex; it's about power. You wouldn't hit someone with a shovel and call it gardening, and it's true. You know, rape is violence. It's not about sex, which is a beautiful thing that people engage in willingly. So to me, it's not even about the sex. I get for some people, they're like, oh God, sex, gross. Or they're, you know, very like trained to think monogamously. But to me, it's about the power dynamic. And you're right, that it gets compounded with the fact that we live in a patriarchal society that is incredibly violent towards women who aren't sex workers. You know, just in general, they're violent against women in terms outside of the physical, you know, in terms of the emotional, in terms of the economic, in terms of the social. So that, of course, compounds this issue that we live in that society. And, of course, basically the bottom line here is the bottom line, right? This is what happens when you have this capitalist structure where, you know, another woman was pointing out that she was working at a coffee shop making, you know, £7 an hour. She's in London, which is like, what, like $9 an hour or something? Right. And she couldn't make rent. And so then her friend told her about this and boom. Would she rather be working at the coffee shop? Yeah, but she can't fucking survive. So the idea of the capitalist power structure combined with the patriarchal power structure is what makes this disgusting. Right. If people want to have sex as a job, fucking great, please do. That's awesome. Like, again, I know a couple of women who do that and they love it. And I think there might be something in there that they're both dominatrixes, like that sort of flipped power dynamic. I think that's also an interesting point, that women who are sex workers often find that it's more empowering to be in that sort of like BDSM space, perhaps. So I mean, but yes, this. So I'm trying to picture it like the differences between this and, let's say, being in the military. So I think there is some similarities here because it's like, in an ideal world, there could be some sort of a group of people could have some sort of defense, you know, their quote unquote military that is defending their land in a way. And, you know, that's goes back as long as human beings, I think. But in our current system, it is a lot of people signing up because of economic force, because they want to fund their college career. They go, oh, I'll be in the military. And then they find themselves in a truly fucked up situation they never thought they'd be in. Now, granted, some of them by this point have been so, quote unquote, re-educated that they think it's great, but they find themselves shooting at
people they don't understand, innocent civilians, like fucking, poor people struggling in some foreign country that they've never been to until they were a soldier. And all of a sudden it's their job to, fear these people and shoot these people. And they're risking their own lives. They could die at any moment. And some of them, I'm sure, find themselves going, what the fuck am I doing here? How did this happen? I wanted to go to college. And I think it's very similar with these women where many of them probably think, oh, this sounds interesting and I want to make money and I wish I had nicer clothes and, sex is not that important to me. So if I, have sex with a guy I don't quote unquote love, that's fine with me. And they sign up for that reason thinking, oh, I'll get these things. And then they find themselves in a truly horrific situation where they're, being raped or beaten or trapped. And so to me, there's a lot of similarities there. Is it naive to think there could be some sort of perfect situation where women, but men too, I guess, agree to prostitution and it's not horrible because it's economic force and
not under a capitalist system, no. Right. Because I don't think there's an ideal, and you mentioned there are prostitution or sex work collectives, like
right.
co-ops.
Yeah.
And in that sense, where, the workers own their own business and I recently watched Pretty Woman, and there's a scene where Julia Roberts is yelling at Richard Gere, and she's like, I am in control of this. I get to say when, and I get to say who, I get to say how much. And it's that sort of control over the situation that these sex work co-ops and collectives are talking about. And that kind of idea is the closest that you could get to the sort of making sex work a more like egalitarian. But I think the problem with sex work is that there's always going to be that patriarchal dynamic in our society as it exists today. And that is so that when women are engaging in it, they're going to be looked down upon, both by the men that are buying the sex and by those in the larger society that look at those women like, oh, you're such fucking trash. Whereas to your point about soldiers, they come home and they're like, right. Oh my God, can you imagine if there was a veteran of a game and a prostitute of the game? Like, no, it'd be fucking insane. So I think that sort of social perspective and that patriarchal perspective is so entrenched that even when you have something like a co-op, you're still struggling with those aspects.
And I think one of the things that probably repulsed you and me the most when reading this article about sugaring or whatever is that the most not the most repulsive, obviously someone beating a woman is the most repulsive, but a truly repulsive thing is the organizations, the companies, the corporations whose job they've decided and goal is to force or trick or talk women into doing this, knowing there are problems that can be created, knowing that plenty of women don't walk away going, man, glad I did that. And apparently some of these billboards and website advertisements online say things like, happy 18th birthday, meet your new daddy. So this is trying to market to 18-year-olds, saying you're barely legal, now let's get you trapped in a relationship with an older man who, funds your clothing or something.
There's also a place on that site for selling your virginity.
No.
Where sugar daddies can bid on your virginity.
And then there's another billboard that said, do you have strong oral skills? We've got the job for you. So this is like a incredibly repulsive group of people. It's like, even if philosophically you wanted to say, look, adults get to make their own decisions. If an adult woman decides to, get paid for sex, why is that any worse than getting paid for working in a coal mine and dying at 45 from black lung? That's an adult decision by a man to do that. And we don't run around going, oh, this is so repulsive that this guy, was forced into this by economic force.
I do.
Well, very few do, though. Very few do. But I think one of the differences is that you don't really have these disgusting corporations like this being like, hey, do you like shoes? Then come get black lung.
Well, right, and this has a lot to do with our relationship with sex, and again, how sex has been, or how sexual violence has been used to keep women down throughout history. So that thread, that historical thread, that modern day thread, cannot be lost here because it's still being used.
So at the heart of this is an indictment of, really, and you've said this, an indictment of capitalism. This is in a spiraling capitalist system that is basically just going towards the race to the bottom, the race to the end point that is the worst you can imagine. This is one of the steps. It's not just prostitution, but it's selling your virginity. It's people selling organs, which goes on as well. It really is, everything is for sale.
Yeah, and I think this will get sidelined by folks on the left or progressive folks who say that like you were saying, Lee, like, well, look, that if she wants to do it and they're willing buyers, then fine. And it's like, that's not the point. The point is that it's something that has to be, like, it's something that's forced. People are forced to make those decisions in a space that you're not allowed to think in terms of, what do I want to do, what would I like to have as my job, would I even like to have a job, or would I like to volunteer for the puppy place down the street.
Well, and to get even more deeper into this, the mind parasite that is capitalism, a lot of these women, maybe all of these women, wouldn't want this for themselves.
Exactly.
If they didn't. Well, okay, you said some people, it's like they can't pay the rent, but many of these women, let's say, get into this because they're like, oh, I really love jewelry and I want nice jewelry given to me. I really love driving around in a hot car, so this guy has a hot car. But they've never been, many of these people, and this doesn't just go for prostitution, it goes for people across our country, didn't grow up in a culture that said, what is your passion? What is it you want to create? What is it you want to build as a human being beyond just what you can buy, beyond just what you can be like, I have this. And so many of these people think that that is their soul. That is what they're about. That is where their happiness lies, is being able to afford certain things, certain clothes, certain cars. It's consumerism, and so it really is. Their mind has been taken over by the fungus that drives the ants insane, and then their brain explodes.
Oh, God, yeah.
It's very similar to that.
And this also reminded me of another issue which feeds into the patriarchy aspect of it. It shows women, imagine that you're driving around with your like 11-year-old niece or something, and she sees one of these billboards. It shows young girls that their body might be their largest asset in the world, that might be what they can give the world. It's like, don't worry about your brain. Leave that to the rich men who are paying for your body. You don't need to think. You just need to fuck. And that's what this kind of shit only perpetuates that idea that the biggest contribution that women can make is either to get fucked or to bear children for the state. And that's absolutely fucking disgusting. And again, that if people want to do this, amen. But that's the same argument that goes for everything. When people were saying like, oh, people are living in like these little pods now. It isn't that great. It's so much more sustainable than everybody having a mansion. What the fuck kind of argument is that for people not having enough money to survive? Like, no, I don't want everyone to live in a 5-bedroom apartment, on Central Park West. Of course, that's fucking absurd. But shoving people into these forced economic situations where they're, sleeping head to toe or head to foot with people they barely even fucking know because they can't make rent. That's not this beautiful story of a more sustainable future. That's the fucking downfall of human rights in a capitalist regime.
Well said. I agree.
Okay.
So we're gonna chalk this up as a bad thing.
Yes, it is a bad thing.
I'm going to chalk this up as a negative.
Sex is a good thing, and women doing whatever the fuck they want, in order to sorry, I lost my train of thought. Sex is a good thing. People doing what they want in this society in order to feel independent and have agency is a good thing. But this sort of economic force, particularly in the confines of a patriarchal capitalist system, is fucking disgusting.
Maybe they could combine the two, and you could sell yourself to a sugar daddy who uses you as a mercenary in foreign wars.
And then you have to dig coal once you get there.
Yeah, put it all into one big boat. Thank you so much for joining us, folks. If you feel like you want this show to continue, go to patreon.com/commoncensored. We have no ads for anything else. We're not sponsored by anyone except you. Patreon.com/commoncensored. My new book is at leecampbook.com. Eleanor's Denver show is on March 17th.
March 19th.
Really?
It's the 17-year anniversary.
Okay.
Stop spreading false news.
Fake news. That's at artkillingapathy.com. Until next time, keep fighting.
Act out.